Hi everyone, I'm Armando Llorente from Clark & Levy Benefit Solutions. I want to welcome you to our HRX. This is the fourth offering of the program this year, and it's a boot camp offering that has been in existence for 10 years. I am really thrilled and excited to address today's topic, which is all about the secret sauce for success at the C-suite. I've been there several times where I've gone in with the greatest intentions and plans and all of a sudden just had my balloon popped by virtue of, wow, this is going in a different direction. But I am thrilled that our guest today, Mike Lindstrom, is going to help us really address the challenge with respect to what we can do to be successful at the C-suite, whether it's on your own team or whether you're going to another company or an employer to really present the message and have a compelling presentation. Before we get started, and I tell you a little bit about Mike, I want to thank our sponsors. We have two major sponsors, our friends at Roundstone, along with our colleagues at Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare. We also have support from Health Plans, Inc., so we want to thank our sponsors in really helping us this year with the launch of this program. My colleague, Mike Lindstrom. Wow, what can I tell you about Mike? I had the opportunity to meet him a couple years ago when I was attending a conference sponsored by the Benefits Advisors Network, of which we, Clark & Levy, are involved with, along with about 100 other agencies around the country. But Mike was there to do some executive training, some sales workshops, et cetera, and had an opportunity to speak with him in light of a whole host of challenges that I had been addressing with some of our clients. And a couple weeks ago, when we started talking about this particular challenge and how to overcome and what we can do to overcome rejection and just know, Armando, we're not doing that. He was like, wow, this is something that I hear often, and I think we can have a great conversation and offer some tips with regards to what we can do, whether it's on our own teams or whether it's in other organizations. So I'm really thrilled for today's program, and in fact, as I encourage a few of my colleagues to do, is send us questions, because this is going to be such a dynamic topic, and I've already got 3 or 4 that have been sent to me, and the first one resonated, like in my opening comment. I was all studious and had all sorts of information and analytics to present, and it was going to be this wonderful presentation, and all of a sudden it was like, Armando, get to the chase, tell me what's going on here, and we'll decide in the next 60, 90 seconds what's going on. And it's like, wow. So we're going to have some fun with the presentation as Mike shares some of his strategies and tips. I'm going to interject a couple of experiences, and I think we'll try to keep this very dynamic and very challenging. As you may have seen some of his videos in leading up to today's program, there are real strategies and tips and stuff that we can do to really be successful, rather than, okay, I think I did all the things that this checklist said that I needed to do, and then, whoops, then what? Yeah. So a little bit about Mike. Mike is a JD, executive coach, author, really an expert when it comes to communications, and you'll see that over the next few minutes as he's able to share many of the dynamic experiences that he's had and really bring this to life. I could go on and on and on in telling you all the great things that he's done. I've got to tell you that he's one of the individuals I've got on my speed dial on my phone, and it's like, here's the situation, Mike, what do you think? And it's like, Armando, let's back up and reframe this situation so that we're successful. So I want to welcome you. I'm so glad that you're here, and we're ready to get started.
Yeah.
So when you hear me talk about the challenges of getting in front of that C-suite and being successful, what are some of the first things that came to mind when it's like, Armando, really?
Yeah. Well, the first thing that came to mind is, I'm like, oh my goodness, human resources. We're going to talk about HR stuff. It's like, and then you go through all the topics: retention, training, recruiting, ROI, all that stuff that that is typical in human resources that you get, as your barometer, as a checkpoint. And I didn't want to have that be our topic. I wanted to do something that was different.
Yep.
So the big thing that that you and I had chatted about before was, okay, well, let's go to a higher level. Let's not get in the weeds of the day-to-day that is HR. Let's go to the things that are the mental struggles, right? The presentation.
Right.
Oh my gosh, I have this great idea. I'm going to go to my CFO or my CEO, or I'm going to go pitch this and have this great idea. And then all of a sudden, it's like a balloon. It pops,
Yeah.
right? So some of the strategies that we're going to talk about today are based around communication. So that's the one thing that really intrigued me about this opportunity to talk about it was, let's just talk about that stuff, because that's everyone on LinkedIn. You know this. You and I chat about this. Everyone's going to talk about that boring stuff, but that's the day-to-day boring stuff.
Yep.
We want to bring this to life.
Yep.
How do we take human resources, all the things that are the typical day-to-day, that are the issues, bring it up to the high level and talk about it at a whole different level?
Yep.
Yeah.
No. I'm excited to do that, and I know that from the initial outline that we've discussed, we're going to have some fun talking about the experiences. And in fact, I'll start with one of the questions that I alluded to. Someone is excited to have their first big presentation in front of their CEO, and they're all excited, and they shared the outline with me. It's like, oh, this is spot on. You're addressing key points, and you've got a sound business case and a good conclusion, and knew something was going to be awry because he got in, and I had 15 minutes for my presentation, and all of a sudden it's like, you've got 5, and start now.
Yep. Yeah, it's funny. I actually got a phone call last week from one of our fellow band network members, and he called me like in a panic mode, and I said, well, when's your presentation? He goes, in 26 minutes. I was looking at the bottom of the hour. It's like literally 26 minutes to the top of the hour. And I said, I'm going to drop my son off. Let me call you back. I called him back in 5 minutes, and that's literally all I had to frame it up. But he was telling me the presentation was so high pressured. He was going against like 6 other companies, and it's literally on a clock. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is not like America's Got Talent. This is your business. This is your corporation. These are expenses. These are human capital. This is your best resource. So for that, I won't say the name, the organization to put him or you in that position, I don't agree with that. By the way, if they were my client, I'd say, come on, guys, give them an hour. Let's talk it out. This is not a pitch. This is not a presentation. So what we figured out was you got to do your homework. He already done that, which was good. But the questions that you ask, throw away the deck. And I'm not saying you got to not do PowerPoint or get rid of your presentation. But he literally went in there and said, you know what, I got to flip the script. I got to ask questions. He'd already done his research. And that's point number one is, you have to do your research. You have to know what the resistance is going to be, but you have to know who you're dealing with in your research. But when you go in there and you ask questions to get people to think about it, and that's what we're going to talk about today is pain and pleasure, values, values, rules, features, benefits. That's what we need to get to. But I think what happens is you get on a track where the client or your team, your own E-team, think about your CEO, right? And we know who your members are. But you think about how their style is. Their style, they want to hear it in a certain way. And then you organize according to. And that's what they expect. So for you to go in and say, you know what, guys, here's the deal. We're going to flip the script today. There's no PowerPoint. I'm going to come in here. I actually have a blank sheet of paper, and I'm going to ask 3 questions. I want you to write down the answer. They're like, oh, my goodness. Oh, my gosh, Armando, where did this come from?
Yeah.
Because it's a pattern interrupt. And I think that's a lot of times in behavior and communication is we get stuck in the everyday, this is what we should do. And that's what I try to break against, like my client the other day. By the way, he killed it. He called me, got the deal. It was great. But it was because he went in against everybody else. I said, what do you think everyone else is going to do? They're going to show a PowerPoint. They're going to have 50 million slides in 15 minutes. And you're going to go in there and you're going to flip the script and ask questions. You're going to bring out your journal and you're going to engage the audience. Wow, what a novel concept.
Yeah. So in the case that I referenced with the presentation that I had, it was all around talent management and essentially succession plans and individuals that had been identified as the potential replacements for some key executives in the organization. And when I was told, you've got 5 minutes, so reprocess my thinking, go to the conclusion to say, we've identified these individuals, these are the plans that we've established for them, yet here's the buy-in that we need from you. And we need to identify executive sponsors for these individuals that are going to take an active role and so forth. So the funny thing was the CEO just looked at me and he said, you should have just started with that commentary and you would have gotten our support immediately rather than show me the analytics of this division and that division and who's who. Is like, What was the key want, if you will?
Right.
And I was like, okay. So for my next experiences going in there, it was all about, okay, what is the end result? What are we really trying to do here? And to your point,
Right.
what was that ask rather than slide 17,
Right.
refer to
Yeah.
list number 12.
Right. You know, I did a seminar last week, and I had probably 250 people in the room. These are mostly CEOs and leaders, and I did an open-ended question. I said, "Does anybody know the definition of a rapport?" And of course, you know, everyone's always shy because no one wants to look stupid or whatever. It's your fellow leaders, and we had a couple of gals in the front raise their hand immediately, and she nailed it. She goes, "Rapport is about connection, how you feel comfortable with someone, and information." I'm like, oh my God. It was like I could have been a plant in my seminar, but it wasn't. And she nailed it. A communication, right, is all about connection, the information, and the sharing. The more information you have with someone, the more rapport you have. And I think that's the challenge we get, especially in HR. We're thinking about rules, compliance, procedure. You know, my father was in HR for years and years. And the one thing that, you know, my dad, to kind of break the construct, was he was just a people person. He would throw you off. He would go in his office and talk about whatever it was. It was HR related. And you're like, wow, Skip is like a real guy. He's a real dude. Like, he would sit down and chat with you about life. And, hey, how's your family? He remember your family. He remember your kids.
Yeah.
He knew what was going on in your life. He'd talk to you about baseball, sports, or whatever. And it was a complete pattern interrupt of what was going on in that life. And I think that's the part about human resources that we forget, is it's still a people sport. You know that. It's a people sport. It doesn't matter if you're pitching your CEO, you're going out there and you're talking, and you got 5 minutes to pitch, just to be able to say, hey, you know what? I knew I had 5 minutes, but you know what? I'm not going to do my PowerPoint. I can actually email that to you. You guys can look at that. You're all sharp people. I just came here to get to know who you are. So if you guys don't mind, I'm going to spend the next 5 minutes asking you some questions. You're going to walk out of there, and they're going to be like, holy crap, who's this Armando guy?
Yeah.
He's not like everybody else, because everyone else was showing up and throwing up all this information that didn't matter. So that's a great point.
No, and it's such a paradigm shift, because
Yeah.
all along the drills that we went through for purposes of, okay, to be an effective presenter, these are the things that you need to do, and this
Right.
is the way that you position your message, and this is how you build your arguments, and
Yeah.
this is how you're going to provide this compelling business
Yeah.
proposition. And it's like, okay, very routine, very
Yeah.
monotonous, and to your point, it's like,
Absolutely.
okay, let's put this aside and
Yeah.
have that conversation.
So I know we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but one of my techniques that we'll talk about here today, we talk about preparation and research, but I think about pre-framing. Framing, it's called the art of framing. The art of framing, we'll talk about a little bit more later, but it's mentally framing it up in your mind how you're going to present, what's your outcome, right? But it's also how you present that information. But if you go in with the outcome of gaining access, getting information, asking good questions, that means you've done your preparation. If you've not asked good questions of yourself, you're not going to ask good questions of other people.
Great
That's why I'm a
point.
big fan of the journal. I carry the journal everywhere I go. It's my journal. It's one of many. But the journal helps me on a plane when I'm walking into a meeting, and I just diagnose kind of my thoughts, and I think about my outcome. You know, what is the things that I want to convey in that point? But I think the research is the biggest part of it. And when you think about framing, the framing is the part of, you know, how you tee it up. And I think that's important.
Yep.
Yeah. Good
So-
stuff.
So you talked a little bit about framing, and I know from some of our earlier discussions, the emphasis on the why.
Yeah.
And it sort of plays to what you were saying on asking the right questions. Let's talk a little bit about that.
You know, it's so funny. Whenever we do projects like this, where I know it's in the calendar, we're going to shoot this stuff, but I always allocate this like 50% of what I'm going to do, like on camera or live when I do news, is authentic and real. Like it's just going to happen. I know it's going to happen. 50%. So sure enough, I'm on the plane. I'm flying out from Phoenix, Arizona, to come to the East Coast to come hang out with the team and be with you guys. And I get a text message right when I'm boarding the plane. And it's one of my, he's in the carrier business on the insurance side, broker, now moved on to some other ventures. And the text message was, I'm going through my goal planning for 2020. And the question he asked me was, what would be some great questions I should journal ask myself to get really congruent with my purpose and my why? Now, he's a previous client, so that word congruent is a word that maybe people don't know out there, but he knows that word. It means you walk your talk. You're trying to be in line with yourself. And I sat there. I was in the airport on a layover when I got the text, and I was thinking about us today, talking about this. And I had to take 2 or 3 minutes to think about it because I know my purpose and my why. That's a whole different seminar. My kids, mainly, my family. But the questions that one would ask going into a meeting or with yourself, because it's twofold, Armando. You know that. If you don't know your purpose and your why for your human self, like who your identity is, there's no way in hell you're going to be able to convey that to another person.
Yep.
You got to know it for yourself. So that's what I said. I said, all right, so here's the questions. Number one, what's the thing that you're willing to struggle with every single day of your life, no matter what? That was my text answer, number one. Two is, what's the thing that you think about all the time that keeps you up at night, that you sleep and it gets you up? What do you think about? What's that thing? Number three, if you had 1 year to live, okay, what would you do with your life? Now think about that. You spend time with your family or travel, or you certainly probably just wouldn't work 80 hours a week and try to build someone else's dream or do something different. You do something for yourself, if you knew that.
Mm-hmm.
Those 3 questions prompt you to think about the purpose and the why. Okay, now I know that's big, but if you take that concept that my client had texted me and you bring that into our world, you're talking about going and doing a presentation. And you're talking about the CEO, the CFO. You're talking about influencers, people you're trying to influence, decision makers. If you're not congruent with your purpose and your why before you walk in that room, why the hell should they buy from you? I mean, really, they should be able to call you and go, whoa, Armando, by the way, we love Clark and Levy. That's great. All the stuff that you guys are doing, awesome. But we want to know in your heart, like, what drives you? You're the HR expert, so what's your deal? And if you're sitting there going, well, I'm not really sure, but what's yours? You already lost.
Yeah.
You have to be able to congruently answer that question. So I think that's the toughest thing about purpose and why, is that everyone talks about it. It's a lot of videos and YouTubes and TED Talks about it, but how many people actually sit down and do it, or pull out the journal and actually write the stuff out and actually speak to it? That's so compelling at the C-suite level. Right?
And your comment about writing the stuff out and thinking through it, more so than just the rote exercise of, okay, I did my analytics and so forth. Right. And it drives that new perspective to say, okay, what is the why?
Right.
And if I have 5 minutes to convey that, how am I going to do that? I don't want to, because the moment that I go in and the audience sees that, or my C-suite sees that, what's going on here, versus here's my vision. Right. And the reason behind my vision is as follows, and here's essentially the business case. Don't call it the business case, but here is the why. And here's the vision for where we are today versus where we're going to be 3, 6, 10 months under.
Think about this for a second. Imagine walking into a meeting, okay? And they give you the whole 5 minute, the proverbial 5 minutes. And like, they're expecting the deck and the pitch. And you say, you know what, guys, before we get started, if you don't mind, I actually prepared some notes for my meeting. This is my journal I keep when I travel, and I actually thought about my purpose and my why I'm in front of you today, and why I want to talk to you about the things I want to talk about today, if you don't mind. I've done that so many times. Let me tell you this, Armando, 20 years, no one's ever stopped me. No one goes, no, you can't read that. You can't pull out your journal. It works 100% of the time. When I pull out my journal in a meeting, they can see writing in the journal. It's all there, guys. You can zoom in if you want. These are all notes I did on the plane. To come here, and this is my new perfect schedule for 2020. It's real. It's dated. And you can actually speak to it. They're like, wow, this guy's so real. Like, he's actually put thought into this meeting. He's not just showing up and throwing up. He's actually thinking about the purpose and the why. So that little technique in and of itself, I mean, gosh, if we just stop this right now, and you said, okay, that's it. That's your technique. That's all you do is walk in next week, talk about your purpose and your why, you're good.
Okay.
Golden.
But there's more.
Okay.
And there's a lot more. And there's more. There's a lot more.
Love it.
And you chatted with me before on, okay, where are you coming from?
Right.
So let's talk a little bit more about what does that mean? Okay, I'm coming from the perspective that I'm a human resources professional, and oftentimes, there's that people element, and you're the one that's going to be doing the activity planning, or you're going to be the one that has the pulse on the organization. That's true, but I'm also looking at it from a strategic perspective to say, how do we use the humans, the employees in this organization, to be successful and achieve the goals and objectives that have been established. So my why and my purpose is usually that jumping off point to say, okay, how do we drive the bus with the people that are on this team to help make things happen? And to your point, I think that starts to change the perspective rather than I'm throwing up information.
Mhm.
Yes, this is important information, but here's why it's important. And
Right.
the perspective is a little bit different. It's
Yep.
getting back to that why
Yeah,
element.
yeah. Well, it was last week. I was having a conversation with one of my HR folks, and they're in pharmaceuticals, animal pharmaceuticals. Very interesting business, by the way, to learn about dogs and cats and reptiles and how they treat. It's a whole different vertical that I'm not used to, but it's still human resources. So there was two people on the phone. He and she were telling me about some of the challenges that were going on with this particular issue. And to your point, I said, guys, get back to the fundamentals. These are human beings. I mean, it's in your title, human resources. Okay, but we forget about the H word. Human. These are human. It's the skin bag you and I live in.
Yeah.
It's the knee, the elbow, the beliefs. It's our history. So when you just own inhuman beings, it might as well be just called that. I'm just in the business of human beings. That's what I do. We might as well just call it that, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
when someone walks in your office, you get that email. What you're really dealing with is corporate therapy, right?
True.
You're dealing with, okay, here we go. So and so's got an issue, or we got a communication issue between the leader and so and so. So we broke this down to the fundamental elements, to the human element. And I don't want to like blow that up and make it change the industry. It is what it is. But I think that's an underscore that I think it's very subtle, that I think that we forget in our industry. It's kind of like when you think about the insurance industry. In the insurance, whether you're a big carrier or a big broker, they use this word lives. Oh my gosh, we got this 1,000 life case. And I said, well, 1,000 life case, that's awesome. Have you actually thought about what you just said? They're like, yeah, it's a big deal. It's a big case. I'm like, 1,000 lives. These are human beings.
Mhm.
These are people who have sickness, people who have cancer, people that are going through stuff. Do you realize that? Like when you're doing the deal, and most of the carrier reps that I know, they're like, oh yeah, you're right, Mike, you're right. Here comes the mic. You're trying to humanize it. But I am trying to humanize it. That's what human resource is about. So when you think about all the operating points that you could go through, how you touch people, how you move people, how you impact people, how you agitate people. And yeah, I said agitate. Agitate means you got to shake them up every once in a while. You got to ask a tough question. When you ask a tough question of someone, and you get them to literally say, Armando, gosh, you know what? I've never thought about that before. That's a great question. When somebody goes, I don't know, let me get back to you.
Mhm.
That's a great question.
Mhm.
That's agitating.
Yeah.
Agitating just means to shake it up. And I think a lot of times when we go into the C-suite, we get so caught up in the pitch, the deck, the presentation, we don't stop and think, oh, right, these are human beings. The CEO, the CFO, the HR director, the CTO, the CMO, all these people have lives. They all have kids. They all got issues, by the way, just like you do, just like I do. We all got issues. So when you can just speak to the issues, but come from that place, from a loving place, and just say, you know what, I need to operate from that mentally. And I think that's a lot of times where the hang up is, because you want to go in there and be the ultimate salesperson or the ultimate pitch person or the ultimate communicator. When you can just actually sit back and like kind of chill back in a meeting and say, hey, I don't know about you guys, but that Christmas party last night was awesome. And they're going, oh, wow, he's a little tired today. Whatever.
Yeah,
Or
yeah,
he's
yeah.
really pumped because they just had a great yoga workout. So it's when you speak to what's going on, that's where you come from the operating point. I think that's important point that most people miss.
Great, great. You talked earlier about pre-framing and some of the important elements of that entire process.
Right.
Let's talk a little bit about
Yeah,
how
so-
I can pre-frame. In fact, I'm thinking, or maybe I'm getting ahead of myself with the pre-frame. Do I step back and say, okay, what is the why here?
Right.
And how do I weave that into the pre-frame so that,
Right.
yeah, I'm asking the right question rather than I'm presenting information.
Right. So let's hold off on the pre-frame a little bit. I already said it, so the cat's out of the bag. But pre-frame is pre means before, frame is what you put around it. So you have to frame things up. But we talk about research, doing your homework, knowing your audience, all that stuff, right? But you think about your values. We talk about values and rules. Values and rules. Values are simply what's important to you. So if I asked you as a client, if I'm the HR director, I said, Mrs. CEO, what's the most important thing to you next year in terms of our human resources initiative? What would you say? And they will give you an answer because you post it, right?
Right.
The answer is the value. Whatever they tell you, that's the value. Now, that's where most people stop. They're like, okay, now I know what's important to her, or I know what's important to him. But now you have to go one step further and say, well, how do they define it? Say, that's the rule. The rule is, okay, so you said the most important initiative is cost savings, or lowering expenditures or whatever, which is very typical. And you say, okay, all right. Now in your brain, you go, okay, cost savings, expenditures. Okay, what's that number? Well, I don't know. I know. I'm the HR director, but this is the CEO of the company. This is the one that writes the checks. So you have to ask that next question. What specifically do you mean? How do you define, that rule or that value? So when they tell you that, that's the problem with values and rules. Is everyone talks about values. I value our integrity, cost savings, giving back to the employee, human capital. You hear all these HR words, right?
Yeah.
And then you go, okay, great. But you say, what specifically do you mean by human capital? That's one of my favorite words. It's so vague.
Yep.
Human capital, what the hell is that to you?
Yep.
But when I ask that question, people are going to tell you that. But you got to ask that question. That's the values and the rules. And that's just something, and that, again, in your preparation of research, we already talked about that. It's asking questions, being prepared to ask those questions in advance. Have your 5 to 10 questions that are very value-oriented. What's the most important thing to you in our spend? What's the most important thing to you in our employee benefit program? Right? What's the most important thing to you for 2020? Those are value questions. Don't stop there. Go one step further and say, okay, how do we define that? Now, a good person like yourself in HR, they've already done their homework on that. They already kind of know the values. They kind of already know the rules. But to be able to go into that presentation and flip the script instead of presenting and asking questions and say, hey, team, I've done a lot of homework on this. I have my thoughts on it. But before I get started and show you what I'm going to show you, I have 3 questions for you. And I want you to write these down. And they write them down. Blank piece of paper. Get the journal out. People are going to tell you. Now you're sitting there with the presenter going, wow, I'm way off. What's on my deck? I probably should ask this question a little sooner, right?
Yeah.
So it gives you a different perspective. And that's why I think values and rules are so important.
No, and I really like the pull element, the pain and pleasure pull element of the discussion, because it sort of reframes and repositions what you're really trying to get at, rather than, okay, I'm the presenter and I'm expected to come in and have all of these diagnostics and numbers and lists and so forth, which, yes, it's important, but at the end of the day, the real opportunity is, now that we have this info, getting back to the why, what's the impact, what's the value to the organization if we do or don't do what we're discussing.
Well, the thing about the pain and pleasure poll that we talk about is most people make decisions based out of pain, most people. So you're quicker to act because you have to, not because you want to. You know what I mean? It's like the gun to the head versus $1 million in your bank account. People will laugh and go, oh, you're going to get $1 million? Yeah, right. But they put a gun to your head, you're like, oh, holy crap, that's real, right? So it's the same thing in business, and the same thing in decisions. When you think about the things that you're presenting, you're trying to convey, you have to think about those things. Like, what are the pain points? No big decision really comes in life at a leadership level, or you and I as human beings, unless there's a little bit of pain associated to it. So when you associate that pain by asking good questions, it's okay to wound. I use the word wound. Wounding is bringing that emotion out on the table and talking about it. Okay, you're not trying to be a therapist. You're just trying to talk about what is. It's like whatever you want to call it, the elephant, the 800-pound gorilla, or whatever. But you have to talk to these issues, and I think that's the hardest part in HR, is that you know that legality is on the line. You know compliance is on the line. You know the brand is on the line. And that's the ultimate, you're the ultimate, I say keeper of culture in HR. I believe that 100%. I mean, I understand, the CEO, speed of leader, speed of pack concept, but right next to the CEO, the leader of the company who founded it, is right the teammates, the partners that are right there with that individual that's going to help drive that culture. And I think if you don't understand that pain and pleasure concept, you're just going in there and just presenting, you're just at a loss. You're already like 5 steps behind.
Yeah. So I had an experience in a prior role where new CEO, global organization in manufacturing and engineering products, came into the first quarterly review, and here was the script, here was the agenda, this is what happens. And I think he may have tuned into your session from years ago, because he basically said, we're going to put all this aside. You know, I see that we've got 7 minutes allocated for sales and 6 minutes for finance and 3 minutes for marketing and so forth.
Yeah.
And it's like, we're going to pull that aside
Yeah.
and we're all going to get on the same page because this was the past way that we did things, and here's the new way.
Yeah.
And the new way is going to be, and it's interesting, the question that you raised about what's keeping you up at night, he basically twisted or provided a different version of that question that said, so what are you afraid to tell me?
Right. It's a great question. That's a brilliant question.
And it was like,
I love that question.
Oh, my
I'm
God.
I'm gonna write that down in my journal after we get out of this meeting.
and it was like, wow. And you could just see
Yeah.
people looking around the room, some who were fidgeting in their chairs, like, you know,
Yep.
here's the CEO,
Yep.
first meeting with 11 executives from around the world and a couple calling in from Europe, and it's like, wow,
Yeah.
what am I
powerful, it's
afraid of?
powerful.
Oh, it was huge, and to that point, it's like, what to keep in the back of your mind
Yeah.
for purposes of, okay, how do I get to that why dimension, and,
Yeah.
and what can I do to really, okay, let's pull all
Yeah.
the stuff and the data. I'm sure it's important, but like you said earlier, you can email that, and
Yep.
at the end of the day, if you've got limited time, what do you do to use that to your maximum advantage and really have the most impact with the organization?
You know everyone's favorite topic is what? Themselves, right?
True.
In life. So imagine like taking an expected 5 minutes that you had to go pitch, and you flip the script and you let 3 or 4 people sit there and talk about themselves for 5 minutes. They're going to walk out there and go, golly, that was the best meeting ever. Because they got to talk about themselves.
Yeah.
But to your point, a well-timed, great, powerful question, that's a great question, by
Yeah.
the way. I mean, that gets me thinking. I'm like, okay, that's a good. I haven't thought about that in the way you framed it, but I think that's an important question that you want to think about when you walk into a meeting like that. And I think that's why when you go to, what are they? Who are they? Knowing your audience, but you have to really get to the values and the rules. I think that's important.
Yeah.
That's great.
Okay, let's continue. We talked a lot about the features and the impacts and the values and the benefits, and I think you really got my attention when, from a benefit standpoint, it may not be the traditional, oh, here's the benefits and this is why it's good, but it was more of like, what does it really mean to you? What does it
Yes.
really mean to the company, to
Yep.
the organization, to the enterprise, so that it's like, wow, it sort of stops you in your track to go back to that question that I just shared with you for purpose of what are you afraid to tell me? And it's like,
Yeah.
ugh.
So Armando, really meaning, we're going to go there. I mean, that's deep stuff. And we're talking about human resource, I thought, today. But I think about meaning. Nothing in life means anything that you make it mean. But it reminds me of my law school days. We had this professor, and he always talked about the philosophy of the law, right? And we talked about Socrates and Plato and Aristotle. And there was this lecture that he gave, and he said that Socrates, which is now known as, by the way, the Socratic method in law school.
Mhm.
The professors you pay a lot of money for, they never answer a question. They just ask you a bunch of questions more, and
Yeah.
they make you look like goofballs, and then you learn from the questions.
Right.
So people would go to imagine this big square in Socrates' days, and they'd ask him, so Socrates, what's the meaning of life? And he would say, well, I don't know. What's it mean to you? And they were like, this guy's brilliant. Well, he was brilliant, but the reason why he was brilliant is because he's asking good questions. He didn't tell you the answer. And I think that's the challenge that we have in corporate America in HR is that we struggle so much with features, benefits, and values and rules, but you have to bring it home. And I think that's part of the script about meanings is you got to let people know what it means. So you have this great presentation, this great deck, and you're going to talk about, oh my gosh, you mean 20% cost savings. This is a great partner. Those are all features. But guess what? Since the time that the audience, was 2 and 3, they've been asking a simple question. Well, why? What's that mean? Why? What's that mean? We're still conditioned that way as human beings, as adults. So to be able to go and convey that message and say, you know what? I know what you're thinking. I'm going to give you all these great features and how it's going to be great for the company or for you, but I'm going to tell you exactly what it means to you. That's where most people miss the mark. And that's an incredible strategy that I use in sales and coaching, everything that I do with my kids. I'll tell my son, Red, I'm like, buddy, I'm picking you up on Friday, right when we do pick up, right at 1:30. His natural brain goes, Okay, Dad, I would expect that anyway. What's that mean to me? What that means to you, buddy, is we're going to go to Chick-fil-A. Oh, now there's something behind it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I think that's what happens in human resource. We get so caught up in staying inside that box. And I hope, hopefully by now you would have checked me in this interview, in this meeting, that I've got that point home. It's don't think inside the box. Don't think presentation. Don't think deck. Don't think pitch. Go in there, ask questions. Know features, benefits. Know your audience. Know the values. But at the end of the day, they're going to ask that one question. What does that mean to me, Armando?
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean to me? That's the most important thing.
Yeah, no, and it's such a key breakthrough and sort of step away from the classical, here's the list and here's my build up to get to this compelling wow moment.
Yep.
And it's like, okay, we can get to that wow
Flip the
moment
script.
with the right question.
Love it.
Exactly. So I think this serves as a great bridge to the framing,
Yeah.
pre-framing, et cetera. And I know sort of like the cat's out of the bag, but
Yeah.
this is such a rich element of the entire thought process and strategy and, what am I going to do and
Yeah.
what am I really trying to convey here?
Yeah, the thing about I learned framing in 1998, and it's a skill I use every single day of my life. That's what I'm doing here today. Framing is not only at the personal level, how you frame up your day, how you frame up the meeting, how you visualize it. You got to go through that stuff in your minds, and that's what great athletes do. That's what great leaders do. That's what great HR people do. They go in there and present. They already have the mindset. They already know what they're going to present, and they know what to convey. But this is actually the script, right? You want to convey, vocally.
Mhm.
What are you going to say in the first 3 minutes that's going to get their attention? You got to know your outcome, know the expectation, know their wounds, know their pains and fears, know who your audience is, and address it. We always used to say back in my influence days when we were doing studies, kill the monster while it's small. Kill the monster while it's small. There's an issue in the room, just deal with it. There's something there that's hanging in there. You know that the CFOs over there are all jammed up on an issue. Just deal with it up front. So when you take it off the table and you pre-frame it, it's no longer an issue. And if you don't pre-frame the issues or the things that you're trying to convey, guess what the listener is doing? In the back of their mind, their 2-year-old, 3-year-old mind, back to their kid days, what's that mean to me? Okay, how does it affect me? Why are you telling me this? Purpose, why, what, meaning, all this stuff. It's so humanistic. It's ridiculous. I mean, that's the thing that blows my mind.
Yeah.
When I was doing a SHRM conference in Kansas City a couple of years ago, and we had about 250 people in the room. And we had these incredible speakers. People from all these big carriers came in, people that were experts, retired people coming in, giving demographics and statistics. I mean, it was mind-boggling, some of the stuff. And I loved it. I learned. I took a ton of notes in my journal. But I was thinking about, wow, I can't wait to get up because we've been sitting here for a full day, and no one's talked about just the simple human being side of this. Purpose, why, communication, meaning, frame. So I had this whole presentation I was going to give. I was the guy that was the closeout guy, the keynote. And I changed my whole presentation after I listened to everybody talk. So I did a whole big pre-frame at the very beginning of my presentation. I said, you know what, folks, I had this great presentation, but I have to be honest with you. After listening to everybody talk and everybody interact, I have to just talk about what is. And it was amazing how the audience, and they've been there for a full day. You know how it is after a full day?
Yeah,
They're like, oh my God, when's happening?
1 minute,
right?
yeah, exactly.
They're looking at their watch. And I finally got them back engaged, but I just addressed what was. I just talked to them as human beings. And I think that's the most important element in a presentation, especially talking to a C-suite, because you have so many dynamic leaders. You have a dominant person, you have an influencer, you have the compliant person, you have the stoic, the person that's asking those questions. But when you can address all 4 levels of behavior, right, not to get too deep in behavioral styles, but when you can pre-frame that stuff up front, it satiates the brain. And it gets everybody to sit back and relax and go, oh, thank goodness gracious, he's going to talk about something that actually matters, but he's going to talk to me in a human way. Huge in pre-framing.
Yeah. No, we've had conversations for the last couple of years now, and I know that when I'm calling you, it's not like, so Mike, here's the situation, what do you think?
Yeah.
It's like, I better have my script ready.
Yeah.
And sort of, okay, here's my mental checklist to say, okay, what's the why? And from a benefit standpoint, what's really going on here, whether it's to me or Clark and Levy or my clients and so forth. So it sort of changed my perspective completely rather than, oh, this is what needs to happen. It's like, back up.
I'm going to think about this, Armando. If I called you out of the blue and you see my cell phone. You're like, oh, Mike Lindstrom's calling. What's your first question?
How's
your
it
brain.
going?
No, in your brain.
Oh, in my brain, what's going on?
What's
Or
going on? Why
What's
is he
going
calling me?
Exactly. Exactly.
That's what we do.
Yeah.
It's instinctive. We've been doing this our whole life. So we already know the brain thinks that way. So now you're going to go present to the C-suite. Why wouldn't you satiate that part of the brain? It's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
But for people to go in there, guns
yeah.
barreling, you got everything. You're going to show up and throw up. And oh my gosh, my deck is so incredible. I mean, the first thing I think about, I don't know about you, bro, but when I look at a deck and I go, oh my gosh, how many slides are in that thing? And I look at my watch and I'm like, we're going to be here for an hour and a half. We're going to be here for a while. Am I engaged? Not even close. But if you come in and go, hey, you know what, by the way, I do have a PowerPoint. You have it as a handout. It's right in front of you. As you can see, I pre-frame. There's only 10 slides. The first one's my cover slide, and the last page is there's my contact information. Everything else is for you to read after the fact. Just engage with me for the next half hour or 5 minutes. That's a frame. That's a pre-frame. Now you got my attention. And that's what I think a lot of times in HR we lose.
So another prior experience. We had corporate quarterly reviews, and it was almost like a badge of honor as to how late we all stayed the night before the rehearsal for the presentation to the CEO and the global team. And it was like, the later, the better. So, here it is. Then typically it was a Friday presentation. So Wednesday night, 9 o'clock at night, we're sending out for pizza. 10, 11 o'clock at night. Oh, well, we got out before midnight. And so the next day we're talking about, okay, tomorrow's a big day. And it was a joke in light of, so how many hours did it take you to put this entire compelling presentation?
Right.
It's like, oh, yeah, we were here until almost midnight.
Yeah.
Okay. And this is all for an hour-long presentation, and there were 9 of us pitching. Yeah. So you do the math. It was essentially, 6 minutes each, and you're trying to right the wrongs of this Fortune 500 company for purposes of finance, marketing, engineering, R&D, whatever it was. And it's like, wow. And fortunately, we had a breakthrough moment where we went off on a management retreat, and it's like, okay, if we continue doing what we're doing, and it's the definition of insanity again, it's like, what are the results? What different results are we really going to achieve? And it's like, wow. So we started going through many of the things that we've discussed earlier, the why, the real benefit here, what's going on. And it's like, hey, we really need to step back and pre-frame the challenge that we're facing here. So the conversation and the discussions were vastly different rather than, okay, Mike's pitch on finance, we hit the bottom line and we reported this to Wall Street and da-da-da-da-da. It's like, next. And if someone would have asked me, so what did you learn after the first 15 minutes of this presentation? Oh, it appears we're doing okay. Yeah. Anything else? No.
Totally get it.
No.
I actually coach and consult a lot of celebrities and influencers. Influencers anymore means like you're on YouTube or Instagram. You're a mini celebrity, if you will. You're not maybe on the big screen, but you're still influencing a lot of people. And I was doing one with one of my really good friends for the last 10 years, Henry. And we had an event, and this guy is like super passionate. I mean, this is one of the most passionate influencers you'll meet, period. And we were doing quote unquote rehearsals, the day before, or the morning before, and I was in the audience. It's a big studio, not a studio, but like not a stadium inside, like a, what do you call it, like a
arena.
Arena.
Yep.
It's an arena. Yeah, it's an arena. Yeah, like it's where you see a stand-up comedy or singers talk or whatever. And he's on the big stage, and I'm in the front row, and you see him going through the rehearsals. You got the mic guys, you got the sound guys, and all that stuff, which is great. You got to do all that stuff, 100%. But he kept wanting to do the dry run and do the rehearsal, and he kept getting. I'm like, buddy, tomorrow night when we do this, you already. All I want you to do, figure out today, is your choreography. Where are you going to stand? Where are you going to speak from? Where's the cameras? Where's the lighting? Because tomorrow night, when it's live time, when it's go time, I want you to talk from the heart. I want you to put your mouth on your heart. And I remember the night we were in different hotel rooms, and I showed him a quick video. Okay, hey, buddy, I love you. I'm proud of you. I said, I want you to do. I know you're thinking about your stuff. You're an OCD guy. You want to nail it. I said, I want you to remember one thing. Put your mouth on your heart and just let it rip. okay? And he went out and he just crushed it. I was so proud of him. But it reminded me when I flew home that weekend that's just a reminder, because we want to rehearse. We want to get it right. We want to get on stage. It's the same thing with the presentation. It's the same thing going to a C-suite. You want to go through it over and over again in your mind. But the truth is, the best presentation you'll ever give when you walk in there is you've done all your prep. Everything we've talked about. You've done your prep. You know your why. You know your values and your rules. You know the wounds. You know what's the audience. And you're going to go in that meeting with your suit and your tie or whatever, and you're just going to talk from the heart. And you're going to pre-frame, and you're going to let them know where you're coming from. And if you can touch, move, impact, agitate, all within a half hour or 5 minutes, that's what's going to compel somebody. That's what's going to compel my buddy Henry to get on stage and move him, because he put his mouth on his heart and he was authentic. And I think that's the part we miss in HR, is because we pigeonhole and say, well, we're not in sales. We're not presenters. Yeah, you are. You're a salesperson. You're one of the biggest salespeople in the organization when you carry that title, human resources, and you know that.
Yeah, no. And I think the recap that you provided is a great way to sort of step back and think implementation, as we sort of change the focus of our conversation now to say, okay, we've been addressing a whole host of issues for the last few minutes, and hopefully those of you that are on the HRX with us today are starting to step back and think of some of the opportunities to process what we said in light of, okay, I'm going to do another key presentation. What's key about it? What is the opportunity to really get people to buy in? As Mike was saying, okay, you agitate. Agitate is not necessarily bad, because if you get that dynamic discussion,
Totally true.
then you're likely going to hit the issues that you want to hit, almost like the new CEO. And the question is like, what are you afraid to tell me? And it's like, that resonated with me, and that's like 15 years ago now. And it's like, but that's really at the heart of what we're talking about here for purposes of, okay, if I step back and I had those 5 minutes, where is the authentic Armando going to come through in light of, hey, here's what we really need to consider, and more importantly, as the decision makers and influencers of the organization, here's what I need from you to help us get there.
Absolutely.
So whether it's in your own team or whether you're going to that C-suite environment, I think we've shared some very, very compelling strategies and tips for people to keep in their back pockets.
Well, I think the biggest difference with our conversation today that I like thank you for bringing this to my attention, because it's just through our work together, it was organic that you brought it to my attention. Go, Michael, you don't understand, like, this may be everyday life for you in coaching and consulting, but this is not everyday life for me. So how do we bring that element to what we're doing at our company, Clark and Levy, and the people around us, the Benefit Advisor Network, the whole groups that we interact with, our clients, and the people that we influence and touch. That's the word I use, the touch. Anybody that you touch in any way. Social media anymore is the touch. LinkedIn is a touch. So any of those kind of touches, hopefully this is a big touch. We're going to influence people and share this idea. And I know it's long. We're here for a full hour, and that's usually the attention span of someone who's really committed. So I'm going to challenge you guys. It's definitely it's worth your while, to take the time to not only invest the hour, but to think about what you're going to do as a result of this. It's not just, oh, that was a feel good. Oh, that was nice to hear, Mike. But to actually go get a journal, think about your purpose, your why, your values, your rules, know the audience, and actually go through the written exercise. I think it just makes you such a more powerful, congruent influencer in HR.
Let's change and address some questions.
Yeah,
and in
love
fact, I have a handful that were submitted before we even started today. And let me just add that if you want Mike and myself to address any of the questions that you have noted during our presentation, please send them to me, armando@clarklevy.com. I'll have an opportunity to review it with Mike, and we will get an answer back to you. But we've got 2 or 3 here that are very interesting and very compelling. So here's one that we briefly touched. I created a 15-minute presentation to introduce a new policy to the C-suite. I got in the room, guess what? Armando, you've got 5 minutes. Uh-oh, now what? So this individual said, tell me the best way to deal with this shortened time frame, or this, oops, surprise, it's not exactly what we were expecting you to do.
Yeah, you walk out.
I'm half serious, half kidding. I remember a time in my life where I had that same situation where I was to give a presentation. I had a certain amount of time that I had, and my time got crunched, and the leader thought, oh my gosh, but you have the end of the meeting. You get to pitch my guys on everything that's going on. And I held my ground. I knew that was an audience. I knew I was going to make some money that day, but I knew I couldn't convey my message in the time that was allocated. So I ended up walking away, and it was one of the biggest learning lessons I learned, obviously, in that position. But you have to know your value, right? That's the whole point. Is oh my, you're going to give me 5 minutes? Are you kidding me? Like, I've come all this way, I've done all this prep work, I've done everything that we've talked about. Know your values, your rules, know your audience, who I'm coming from, and you're only going to give me 5 or 10 or 15 minutes. No, I understand when you were talking about like the once in a lifetime opportunity, like I always call it the Gordon Gekko moment in Wall Street. You know, Bud Fox, and you got Gordon Gekko. He's been trying to get this big whale in Wall Street forever, and Gordon Gekko goes, "Why am I listening to you, Kimosabe?" That's the quote. And Charlie Sheen has to look at him, and he starts talking in his brain. He's like, "What am I going to tell this guy? What am I going to tell this guy?" And then he starts talking about this product, this pitch, of course, which is the downfall of his character, which is his dad's company. But everyone has what I call their Gordon Gekko moment, right? So if you have 10 or 15 minutes genuinely and you're not willing to walk away, you've already done your homework and everything we talked about today, then you're okay.
Yeah.
You're going to be able to talk about purpose. You're going to be able to talk about why. You're going to be able to ask a question. You're going to be able to say, you know what? I don't have time for the PowerPoint. I'm just going to flip the script and ask questions. So if you've done everything we've talked about today, then you should be okay. I would want to reschedule that. But if I didn't, I just do what we did talk about today.
Okay. Here's another interesting scenario. So I delivered a proposal to implement an employee benefits program enhancement that was cost neutral. Okay. Got in front of the C-suite, and they just looked and said, hey, we have more pressing business priorities. Specifically, we need to reduce scrap and rework. Okay.
I guess it's kind of like question number one. You kind of go back to the drawing board and go, well, why are we here? I mean, but I think the biggest thing I would do with that is I would ask a few questions, though. I would want to dive in a little bit to try to uncover the wound or the pain. What's really going on there? What's one of my favorite questions I ask myself when I'm confused or I get stuff like that is, what's really going on here? What's really going on here usually has nothing to do with you. It has to do with someone else or the team or the culture or expenditures or whatever. So I would ask a few questions and kind of recoil, but you're not going to be effective if they're already in that, I would say, infected mindset. But you still got to get as much as you can from that group or that team to understand what you're dealing with. And it's important.
Great. Yep. I'm notified it's my time to enter the boardroom.
Yeah.
But when I step in, I can tell that the executive team demeanor, they're agitated, except this is agitated in the wrong context of what we talked about.
We talked about earlier.
Yeah. Ideas or thoughts on how to diffuse that?
Yep. I actually had a leadership training a couple of weeks ago, a big client of mine, and the group had a lot of stuff going on that had nothing to do with me prior to me walking in, and we only had, I think, 12 people in the room, small conference room, so everyone was really tight. Like, you didn't have any space between, walking around, and I'm going to be one of the facilitators, speakers. But I got that vibe. I don't know. I didn't know what was really going on, but I felt it. And I think that's what this person's talking about. So I called an audible. It's kind of like in football. You're the quarterback. You get up there under center and go, okay, I know it's a pass play, but I see that everyone's backed off. I should probably call a run play. It's the same type of thing in presenting. So instead of going headlong into what I prepared to do, I said, hey guys, if you don't mind, I'm new to the group. I don't know all of you very well, but if you don't mind, I want to go around the table, and I'm going to ask you 3 questions. If you can, tell me your name and tell me your title. What's your big responsibility at the company? And what I did on that particular meeting, I said, tell me one thing you used to do as a kid that you wish you did more of now as an adult. Like, what's the one thing you used to do all the time? Ride bikes, climb trees, build forts. I mean, I've heard them all. I've asked that question for a long time. Oh my gosh, Armando, the whole dynamic of the room shifted. So it's called a pattern interrupt. So a pattern interrupt is more of the feel the vibe of the energy of the group, like the question asked, but it's really getting you to change the direction. But the fail safe is always get them to talk about themselves, right?
Yep.
That's everyone's favorite topic is themselves.
True.
Yeah.
Awesome.
It's awesome.
Well, we've had a wonderful hour-long conversation.
Yeah, I can't believe it's been an hour. It's flying by.
And it's just, I'm just so, what about this and what about what? it's just like, wow, where do I start? But again, let me just reiterate, if you have questions, please send them to me, armando@clarklevy.com, and we'll be happy to address them. Mike, can't thank you enough for this session. I think that the opportunities to really step through each of the phases of what we've discussed for, okay, know your why, understand the values of the organization that you're going to be in front of. And at the end of the day, it's not necessarily all about you, but it's like, okay, what's the pulse here that I'm trying to impact? And the tips around pre-framing and agitating and so forth, really compelling information that I hope when you're in front of your next C-suite or your organization's C-suite, that you're able to apply some of the tips and strategies that Mike has shared with us.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is, even if anybody's watching this, whether you're in HR or not, I always try to give my message to be global. So it may hone into a given vertical, but everything we've talked about is applicable to anybody. A CEO should know this. A VP of sales should know this. A marketing person should know this. And the more that you're congruent and tied in with yourself and you know these things, the more powerful you are as a communicator, the more powerful you are as a parent, as an influencer. I mean, I think the biggest identity that I think I have as a human being is being a father and a husband. And all the stuff that we've talked about, I've applied on myself. I know my why, I know my purpose, and I'm not saying I'm better than, I was taught this stuff, and I wasn't the guy that said, oh yeah, that sounds great. I was the guy that bought the journal, went out and started doing this stuff, started writing. What's written is real. When you start writing this stuff and you start getting congruent with who you are as a human being, it just makes you so much more powerful in everything you do. So I just want to relegate this to it's HR. I mean, that's our topic, obviously what brought us here today, but I really mean this from the bottom of my heart. If you mean this, apply the stuff, it'll mean so much more to you as a human being. So I want to say thank you. By the way, if you want to check out my website, it's going through a little bit of a redo. It's MikeLindstrom.com.
Thank you.
LINDSTROM, and we'll put this all on LinkedIn and everything like that. And I'm super big on social media, connecting with people, meaning LinkedIn. So don't feel weird about connecting with me. I'll absolutely accept, because I like to connect with people out there. I never know who's going to be my next partner or my next friend or client. So I thank you so much, Armando.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's awesome.
Well, once again, we thank you for your participation. Best wishes for happy holidays. See you in 2020. Have a great day.
Awesome.